I remember someone saying, "Why not you?" That was a significant mindset for me when I was able to say, well, there isn't a single competitor that I haven't beaten at least a couple of times. And so you knew it was possible. Another milestone was, well, I won a World Cup race. All of those competitors were here at the same time, and I came out on top. And it's sort of, you go through steps that way of convincing yourself that it could actually happen.
Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 153. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. Before I get into it, I'm trying something different. If you like this one or previous ones, please subscribe or leave me a review. Trying to build some more exposure around this thing. Today's guest, our good friend Jeff Shepard, did the intro. I always appreciate his thoughts and the people he's connected to, so please name and who you are.
I am Duff Gibson, and who I am, I would say husband, dad first. I'm a firefighter in Calgary, ex-national team athlete and coach, among other things.
The question gets people thinking, and it's I find some people just know it, but there's always a different approach to it. When you start with family, like when you start with your family, kind of who you are, that's an interesting angle because a lot of people don't touch on that. And then some people just don't know how to articulate it.
Well, who am I? That's such an open-ended question.
Yeah.
And if you go in if we're talking about sport, often I'm an Olympian and they want to talk about sport specifically.
Yeah.
So you think in those terms and you present yourself in those terms, but when it's so open-ended like that, my family is the most important thing. It's sort of the motivation, for everything that I do, I guess, ultimately.
Yep. Artists are really interesting because they don't know how to put themselves in a box. They don't want to say like what kind of painter they are or what kind of graffiti artist. It's a weird spot for them to say like, I am this maybe today. And then who knows what happens next week.
Yeah. I'm creative.
Yeah.
I would say I'm creative also.
Yeah.
Making videos. I wrote a book. I could have described myself as an author.
Yep.
Hope to again in the future.
Yeah. You just never know, right?
You never know. Well, Have you seen, you have a friend of mine got an AI generated book about him for Christmas. And it's basically you punch in some information and it just makes a book. And he showed it on social media saying, I've been working on this for, just making a joke about it. But that would be really interesting to see, like, what does a computer think you would say?
What'd be interesting for you is because your name's all over the internet. If you actually went to GPT and said, okay, I'm thinking of writing my next version of my book. Can you research every mention of me on the internet and come up with my story? And here's some context for the first couple of chapters of my backstory. Born here, did this. Yeah. And like 7 minutes later, you'd have a book and you'd be the next guy on social, like your buddy would be like, yeah, I wrote this book in 8 minutes and hopefully you enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all possible.
It's possible. And that's an interesting thing. And it's something that I'm a little afraid of.
For sure.
Also.
Yeah.
I'm sure you are as a creative person.
For sure.
Our eldest son just got a diploma in 3D imaging and design, a computer related kind of a thing. And I hope that puts him high enough in the pecking order, or hierarchy, I guess is a better word, to run the AI as opposed to be eliminated by AI.
That's it. The human element is going to be interesting how it fits. This, will we be able to fake this one day? Will I be able to take your being and just you and I have a conversation just like over the phone and the next thing you know, I can make this? I don't think so, but probably.
Yeah. Well, the deep fake,
yep.
Visually you're getting pretty close now.
Yep.
And that's a scary thing. I think what I want my kids to know, I think of it in the context of, will my kids be victims or lemmings to someone else's social media campaign? Like the way we conduct political discourse now is scary. And so many people are, just a pawn in someone else's political or financial or corporate. That's a very heavy thing to say, but that's the reality. I don't, I've had conversations, I can think of one with another firefighter, where it was a Black Lives Matter. I'm very careful not to be political on this. Yep. So this is two sides of an equation. And a friend said to me, there's a Black Lives Matter protester punching the crap out of an old man who's at a Blue Lives Matter protest. How is that possibly justifiable? And it depends so much on where you get your information from. And the answer to it was, well, the Blue Lives protest had come into the square where the black, you know what I mean? So, and that could happen in either direction. And it probably does every single time happen in both ways. And someone, depending on who pays their paycheck, takes the picture of this guy beating up this person, but ignores this. But you know what I mean? You can paint that exactly how you want. And half the people will eat it up and half will reject it as nonsense. For sure. Instead of actually doing what we're doing right now. And that's why when you said, can you fake this? Can you deep fake this, or a computer AI version of this? That's a very scary thing, because the answer to the left versus right and the extreme left and all of this, which is crept very quickly into Canadian political discourse also. The answer, the solution to that is actually have a conversation with the person who doesn't agree with you and realize he's not an asshole. And he has his or her reasons for thinking the way they do. And maybe you learn something, and maybe you, if you're left, maybe that conversation pulls you a little more middle, or if you're right, maybe that pulls you a little more middle. It's going to be an interesting time. And to have kids, about to crack into the workforce, especially in that realm, will be interesting. You've seen a couple of these? Yes.
So, I like the guests to go back as far as they want to go, where they grew up, how they grew up, parents, siblings, jobs, sport, school, and then kind of all the way to where you are today. So take this thing back as far as you want to go. And we got all the time. You just
dump it in the guest's lap. Eh?
That's it, because it's the less I say, the better.
Well, I grew up in various parts in and around Toronto, Scarborough mostly for my high school years, for example, junior high and high school, and went to the University of Western Ontario, or they just call it Western now for university. And I'm skipping over a lot of stuff, I guess.
Yeah, we'll go back.
But it's up to me.
Totally.
And at Western, I got a kinesiology degree. And in my last year, my fourth year at Western, I took a very applied exercise kinesiology, exercise physiology course, where it was all about sport. I've been Olympics obsessed, I would say, for my whole life. And I remember,
always?
Pardon me?
Always.
Well, I remember when my sport dream started.
Okay.
It was just before my 10th birthday, watching the Montreal Olympics in 1976. And I still vividly remember watching volleyball from that, and watching Alexiev, the Russian weightlifter, carry the flag for the Soviet Union, and the decathlon, and Greg Joy winning the silver medal in high jump, and all of these things. And I also had a junior, I was in elementary school at the time, obviously, and my volleyball coach was a Mr. Little, and he was a referee at the Montreal Olympics. So it's sort of, there was that connection that made it real, kind of. And he actually told me this, he told the team this story at one point, which I think was very influential. He said, we were playing volleyball, and the nature of volleyball is that the ball lands and it's either in or out. And we would argue about whether it was, no, that was in, like street hockey or anything else that kids do. And the coach called us over, and he told us about a specific moment at the Montreal Olympics that he had just come back from. And he said that there was the two of the top teams in the world were playing a guy spikes the ball goes out, but was incorrectly called in by the line judge. And the guy who spiked it's almost emotional for me because it's what we are lacking now. Sport has gone completely in the other direction. But he spikes it out and was awarded a point. So he goes to the referee and tells him, I hit it out. And then a player on the defensive team goes up and says, no, I touched it. And I don't know if that was factual or not, but the interpretation is the same. It's like, no, it's okay. Like neither wanted to take a point by a mistake. They wanted to earn it. And they were, both medal contenders at the highest possible level of volleyball. We were just these, spastic kids rolling around on a gym floor in elementary school. But it was like, wow, that's what an Olympian is. And so that was very influential for me. So in my last year of university, I took this course that was very applied. It was all about athletes. It was, referencing studies of these super high performance athletes and what kinds of training they did. And I thought it was so interesting. And I said to I think it was a Dr. Patterson, I said, is there if I want to do a master's degree in this, is there a program that you would recommend? Is something offered here? And he said, in Canada, there's one spot and there's one guy, and it's the University of Calgary, and it's Dr. David Smith. And so I wrote Dr. Smith, who just retired a few months ago, actually, and the rest is history in that regard. And that I've been in Calgary ever since.
Amazing. That Olympics, the Montreal Olympics, what was it? Like, what was it that just caught your attention? Because for context, I've been a sport guy my whole life. It's obviously not at your level, but sport's been like right beside me. The Olympics were probably like the Ben Johnson era is kind of when I was like inspired, impacted by sport. Obviously what happened went
that's
sideways.
The Calgary year also, right?
88 was cool, yeah. When I remember like walking around with the candles on 14th as the flame would come around, the torch would come running by. So what do you think was it that caught your attention that deep?
I assume that it was Montreal only because I would have been too young to remember the previous one.
Right.
And that it's still me.
Yeah.
It's still, you want to do something? The Olympics are on. I'm going to be sort of a shut in for a couple of weeks and, tearing up over great Canadian performances and great showings of character or something above and beyond just how good you did. Yeah. So it was probably always there. I think it's nature nurture. My dad was a great sportsman. My mom, and they were both on exactly the same page in terms of the values of it, the importance of sport. How important is sport? Not really. It's just sport kind of thing. It's something that you put so much time and effort into it, but it's really about what it teaches you. It's really about the values that you learn. Sport is such an incredible, this is where I am now. Sport is this beautiful tool to teach values. Yeah. And I worry that we're forgetting that and doing that wrong a little bit these days. Maybe social media, maybe there's so many more distractions for sure now than when I was a kid. Yeah. But when I was a kid, my influences were my parents when I was very young, obviously, like anybody. And I really had a strong sense that the whole neighborhood felt the same way. And there were a few teachers, both my parents were teachers. There were a few other teachers in the neighborhood, and it was very much the sun is shining, you should not be inside. End of story. And there was no, and if you said that to a kid these days, they'd take their phone and they'd be scrolling somewhere out of view, And, when I was a kid, there was a whole bunch of kids. There was a full road hockey game, 2 sides, full of kids who were just in my grade, let alone kids who would be a year older or a year younger. Yeah. So it was a perfect storm to grow up in. And it was, I think back on that in terms of values, in terms of the benefit of sport, we would make the teams even. So it wasn't about the win. It was about the challenge. And we knew that inherently back then. I think that's one of the issues right now in sport, that you would craft a team, you would affect, if you were the coach of the team, you would set it up so they would play teams you knew that they would win to build their confidence. You see that the World Juniors now. I have to run up the score against so-and-so because it's, you know what I mean? Like I have to build the confidence of the athletes. That's my opinion on it. But back then it was, I can think of this one example. We had one goalie, so we had 6 people, not enough to have a full road hockey game. So we'd have a goalie and then 3-on-3, maybe 2-on-2 on someone's driveway, and there'd be 2 kids waiting, and it was sort of a king of the hill kind of a thing. If you'd win, then the loser would sub out and the other team would come on. And if the score was, you'd have a game to 5 or a game to 3 or whatever. And if it was a 1-goal win, no problem. If it was 3-0 or 5-0, we'd change the teams.
Even them out?
Even them out. As elementary school kids.
Yeah.
Why did we do that? Because on some level, we had a sense that made it better. That it wasn't fun for the winner or the loser if the score was 5-0.
Yeah.
And that's something, now I've sort of, once my coaching career was done with Skeleton, with Team Canada kind of stuff, I started something called Dark Horse, which is a kids multi-sport program. And so I talk to kids all the time. That was 2016. It's still running. It starts tomorrow, actually, the winter session.
Cool.
Should I give the detail? No, this won't be out. This won't be out in time.
Sell the last couple.
Yeah. And one of the stories that I tell them, because I think a big problem in sport is that there are kids who don't want to play because they think they're not as good as the other kids. And what a horrible, tragic reason not to play sports, because you think, oh, this kid beside me is better than me. Yeah. So I try and de-emphasize, as my parents did for me, I de-emphasize the importance of who the winner is. And I use this example. If I have 2 buddies who are, it doesn't matter what the sport is, hockey. And they each have a team and they each need a player. And they both text me and say, hey, we need a player. Can you play for us this weekend? And Team A is playing Team B. And the last time the 2 teams played, Team A won against Team B 10-0. Which team do you want to play for? And most kids would say, oh, well, I'd rather win than lose 10-0. And my perspective is, I can't think of anything that I'd be less interested in doing than being on a team that was going to win 10-0. Yeah. Because over the years, I've developed this sense of the challenge is half the fun, maybe perhaps more. And so I have no interest in playing for a team that might win 10-0. I'm kind of interested in playing for a team that lost 10-0 last time. And I don't expect that I can turn the tides, but maybe it'll be 7-2 or something. And so that's challenging. That's exciting. That's interesting. I don't know how I got on that. Now I don't know where to go from.
I got your back.
Okay, thank you.
It's interesting because as you're telling that story, I'm like, what would I do? 10-0. Depending on the sport, it's kind of like, if you can influence change a little bit and get it to 7-2 or get it to whatever the number is, it's kind of fun to go on the dark horse and just kind of try and make it closer. Because the people that got whooped, you all come up together, right? Like everything just kind of comes up. It just gets a little bit better because you're there to help.
I have a memory of our youngest son, who's 17 now, still plays hockey. When he was I don't think he was a Timbit. He might have been U8. Yep. And they went to a tournament where they played against a, quote, traveling team from Estevan, Saskatchewan. Yeah. And they scored 1, but they lost, I think it was 12-1. And I thought, I'm happy to not be on that team, because the kids who scored the 11th and 12th goals, they slid along on the ice on their knees like Darren Fleury used to do back in the day, like they had just won the Stanley Cup or something. And it's like, if that's fun for you, if getting a hat trick is fun for you, at the highest level, no player in the world gets a goal a game.
Yeah.
So what is the challenge is the fun part. And I don't know where those players are. I have no idea what, but for Tay, his team played so far over their heads the next game because they had a firsthand sense of what it was like or what it could be.
Yeah.
And that's the benefit.
Yeah.
I think this all came about because I was talking about the influence of my parents in my athletic career. And it was from day one, it's just sport. Did you win? Good. Don't forget it's just sport. It does, it doesn't really matter. The outcome, especially, that's what I find. It's very difficult for me to have grown up in that context, to go into a hockey arena, a soccer field, a gymnasium, whatever it is, and see a parent get so emotionally ego wrapped up in the performance of, especially in community hockey, two randomly divided groups of kids. My randomly divided group of kids is better than your, it's just, it's, my father would never have lowered himself to have his ego involved in that. And someone would say, well, this is AAA hockey, so it's very serious. Well, my father represented his country in a combat sport, so he competed at the highest level. Yeah. And still, that was his perspective. And I feel like as an athlete, that perspective served me so well. My success was all entirely based on my passion for it, not because someone was yelling at me to try harder. It all came from me. And I've learned that on the other side with my own kids, actually, that in the words of my brother-in-law, I've given credit for this. He says, you can't want it more than they do. Yeah. And that's the reality. As much talent as I would tell you that my kids had and have, if they're not in the backyard shooting hoops or taking shots or watching it on TV or thinking about it on a regular basis, then it's ultimately not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
And you have to, and that's okay because the benefit and the beauty of sport is the life lessons, is the camaraderie, is the, leading an active and healthy lifestyle.
Did your parents put you into everything in sport? Like from, elementary, junior high, was it just like choose your own adventure? Here, try this, go do that, like just 12
yes
months?
And no. I think back then, I'm 58, so back then there was less stuff. Yep. And I feel like in Calgary, that's one of the great things about being at an Olympic host, living in an Olympic host city, is that we have a speed skating oval. We have, until recently, we had a bobsleigh or luge track. So there are all these things that you can try in Calgary that you can't really try anywhere else. But back in the day, it was a different landscape also because I grew up in another province many decades ago. We had school teams in elementary school, and they don't have that now. They don't even have phys ed teachers in elementary school in Alberta.
No way.
Yeah, unless you're in a private school or some special situation. So, it's a different environment. But, I played hockey, community hockey. Did I play anything? There was a lot of kids who played, it was softball back then. There was no baseball where I grew up. It's funny. It was all underhand, fast pitch, but almost everything that I did was school based. And I really wish it would get back there because then you got everybody. Yeah. And I feel there's a real opportunity there, or a real failing of the, physical education in school. No school teams until junior high, that kind of a thing. We could be doing better there.
Coming out of high school, did you have a plan? Did you know what you wanted to do right away? Like what was the tail end of high school? What did it look like for you? Were you working yet? Were you doing?
No, it was for sure that you were going to university.
From your parents or like?
From my parents.
You're going.
I never fought them on it.
Yep.
So I don't know. It never got to the point where it was this. Yep. It was a fight about it. I just always thought, oh, I'm going to do that. That's what people do. And back then, so many more people do that.
Yeah.
My own kids, our youngest is going to get a trade, he wants to get his electrician's ticket and go to SAIT and maybe take some business courses also. And my wife and I are like, that's great. You'll always have work. You know, no robot is going to take that job from you. But yeah, back then it was go to school. And then when I was done school, I came to Calgary and did more school. So.
And it clicked for you? Like when you kind of found this kinese, like it made sense to you?
It was something, I knew that there wasn't necessarily a practical application for it.
Yep.
Ultimately, I was a coach. Ultimately, I just thought it was something that I was really interested in, so I would always use it.
Right.
And that's true. And I don't know that I would, given the cost of everything, I don't know that I would go the same path today, but it was following my interest back then.
Did you know what the outcome was going to be? Was there like
No.
Like it wasn't, you had no idea?
No.
You're just like, what do you think? You were trusting it or just like experiencing it, like having experiences and then figuring it out on the fly? Or what do you think you were?
My head was all around being an Olympian.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
And were you, at that point, had you been like honing your craft?
I was one of those jack of all trades, master of none at that point. Yeah, I say that I competed in 5 sports, each time thinking this is the one I'm going to train and train and train, and that's my ticket to the Olympics. And I describe it as I have an unusual path to the Olympics because, you know, typically you would take swimming lessons and then get into swimming when you were 8 or something, and then you would either be good enough or you weren't good enough that you would challenge to try and make a national team. I tried 5 different sports, beginning with wrestling in high school, and in each one of these sports, I was good enough to win a city championship.
Oh, so you could play at a high level.
Yes, but still, like in wrestling, for example, I won twice and I was runner-up twice for the Scarborough High School championships. Yep. But there were people who were grown men. I was not a grown man in high school, you know, and there were people who could still wipe the mat with me. Yep. You know, so it's when I was done high school, and went to university. One of the reasons why I chose Western was because of their rowing team. And I have an uncle who is not too much older than myself, who went to the '84 Olympics in rowing. So I took up rowing, but I'm not 6 feet tall. I'm just under 6 feet tall. And at the time I was much skinnier. So it was lightweight rowing, and I was on the varsity team at Western for a couple of years, but there was no lightweight at the Olympics back then. And so at some point it was, I was hoping that they after that they did bring lightweight into the Olympics, but I had moved on at that point. And when I moved to Calgary, it was right after the '88 Olympics, and I was speed skating. That's going to be the sport for me because you have the sprints, you have the long distance. Yep. Regardless of your muscle fiber typing or whatever it is, you'll find your spot somewhere in there. And, you know, again, I was Team Alberta, pretty good, you know, really good quickly. Yep. Team Alberta in my second year, but still a big chunk away from contending for a national team spot or whatever. So, this is sort of a long story.
I love it. Oh, I love it. Like, this is like, because I had no idea. So this is like, I can just picture all these like these attempts to do something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I had a classmate. So I moved to Calgary to take my master's degree in kinesiology and took up speed skating because I watched the Calgary Olympics and Gaetan Boucher. And I thought, I'll be right there. I'll do it. So I took it up, and I had a classmate who was a bobsleigh coach, and he said, do you want to come out? And they needed an extra guy one day, basically. And the training, it's like sprint training. And he said, it'll help your starts for speed skating anyway. Do you want to do that? And within a year, I was ranked higher in bobsleigh than I was in speed skating. So did that for a while. I've actually made a national team in bobsleigh as a crew member, as a pusher.
Yep.
And after a knee operation and 6 or 7 years of doing that, not, and making a national team, but it just being such a negative environment, a very testosterone flooded environment. I can beat you by 100th of a second, so I probably won't talk to you because you're not in my league kind of environment. They decided that skeleton was coming back into the Olympic program. And I thought, well, I don't have to mortgage my house to have competitive equipment. I don't have to convince anyone else to not go with Team Canada, to go with me so I can contend for a spot on Team Canada. And I just decided, okay, I'm going to switch to skeleton.
When you get into all these sports, was it like you were dead serious that you were going to chase this Olympic dream in all these sports? And did your lifestyle kind of match that goal?
Yes, to the extent that, well, I didn't know what my chances were.
But you planted that seed. You're like, I'm going to put some...
It was a dream.
Yeah.
And it was, as a speed skater, it was a full-time, I was taking my master's degree at the time. So as a full-time student, and when I wasn't at the books, I was training. So each time, there was a powerful dream pushing me for sure. And each sport sort of teaches you more about yourself. You have access to different types of training methods. You understand, in speed skating, I appreciated that I was more of a power than an endurance athlete. So you progress, you learn. You've heard athletes, Jerry Rice comes to mind as someone who was very successful later in their career. And they said, I didn't train harder, I trained smarter. Well, the longer you go, I can tell you exactly what kind of Romanian volume training will result in me setting a personal record in my squat, for example, because I've tried 30 different kinds and I know the one that works best for me. And as a coach, I've assigned that training program to other people, and it doesn't work the same way for everybody. You know what I mean? You amass self-awareness is the great untapped concept for athletes, because the program that someone gives you, the physiotherapy, the sleep, the diet, all of that, there's obviously general rules that vegetables are better than soda, for example. We all know the basics, but there are athletes where that makes no difference at all because of X, Y, Z, your own biology, everything else that you eat, whereas for certain people, that will make a critical difference. So it's all about you. How does that apply to you? Anyway, so how did I get caught on self-awareness there for a while? You were talking about my motivation for...
because it's because you tried a bunch of... you're really going after it. There was this thing driving you to get there.
Yeah. Well, the reality of sport is that how we see it is such a comically oversimplified version of it. And we think the champion is the person who never gave up, just refused to quit, was just mentally tougher than everyone else. And those are based in reality. Those aren't baseless concepts. But in sport, that's such an oversimplification. And success so often has to do with a passion, a love of it, thinking about it all the time. The stories of Wayne Gretzky with a pad of paper, watching a hockey game by himself and just, drawing an arena and then charting where the center or the left wing goes when they have the puck and when they don't have the puck. That is so far outside the scope of what my own kids are interested in, or most kids, right? But it's that passion that translates, especially in a team sport. But in a team sport, and more so in, let's say, the 100 meters, there's a genetic component, an unavoidable genetic component. And you could train your whole life, Jeff, to be, the perfect diet for you, the perfect training method, and Michael Phelps will get off the couch 10 years into retirement and beat you because he's built like a fish. So there's that aspect, and I learned that firsthand from trying these 5 sports and ultimately landing at a sport that required exactly what I was suited for and didn't involve what I was not suited for.
Yep.
Because we are all built a certain way.
When you're kind of testing these different sports, and like the moment you realize it's not the sport that's going to get you there, is it self-awareness, or is it your understanding that your genetics, you know, your makeup is only going to get you to here? What's the thing that kind of puts you on the next path? Is it bad teammates, or is it, you know, the results aren't there? Is it like, I just see another opportunity?
For rowing, each time the next opportunity sort of put itself in my lap.
Right.
There's a, what do you call that? Serendipity?
Yep.
There was sort of a planet alignment aspect to it for sure in each case. And a lot of it had to do with living in Calgary. So Bob's speed skating, I was coming here for school.
Yep.
Speed skating was the option. Speed skating didn't work. I knew a bobsled coach, and they needed a guy one day. I was tired of the politics in bobsleigh. Skeleton is now an Olympic sport. Well, if I had just decided skeleton in high school,
Yep.
it wouldn't have, you know, where would that have gone? I have no idea. I have no idea, because I was a completely different human being when I got to skeleton.
So when you find it, it's a new sport. Like, is it the first time it's going to the Olympics, or had it already been in the
Skeleton?
Olympics? Yeah, when you showed up.
I went to the first time it was in the Olympics in its second iteration.
Right.
So the home of skeleton is St. Moritz, Switzerland.
Okay.
And so the 2 times that St. Moritz has hosted, skeleton has been in the Olympics.
Gotcha.
And it has, since 2002, it has been a part of the Olympics.
So,
But there's been a World Cup, a World Championships, a World Cup circuit in skeleton forever.
okay.
Yeah.
When you find skeleton, is school done? Are you done?
Oh, yeah.
So you're done school.
By a lot, to the point where my mom would say, "You're 32 and you're..."
That's when you're...
Yeah, I started when I was 33.
Wow.
But when I was 32, my mom said, "What the heck, you know, you're a grown up. It's time to get on with your life." And in essence, when I got into the fire department, it was half, oh, how wonderful to be in the fire department and a job that I can proudly tell people what I do for a living.
Yeah.
And the fire department has been a wonderful thing for me. But it was also, okay, now my mom won't bother me anymore for not having a career, and I can still chase my Olympic dream.
4 on, 4 off.
Yes.
So coming out of your master's program, that's where you came. So you finished that, and then what happens? So
Then I'm literally training as an athlete and working to pay the bills, chasing an Olympic dream until I get into the fire department.
and where were you working?
I did a few odd jobs. I was like a night watchman at a golf course at one point, but most of the jobs that I had, like I worked at Lindsay Park, or what I call Lindsay Park. What do they call it now?
Me too. I have no idea. Talisman or...
I have no idea. I think it's Repsol.
Is it? Or I
think it's Repsol.
I have no idea.
If you're
Lindsay.
of my generation,
Mine too.
you
Lindsay
referred
Park.
to it as Lindsay Park. So, and that's where I met my future wife also. So I was a exercise specialist, I think was my title, and I would write programs and take shifts in the weight room and various things, and until I got onto the fire department in 2000.
That transition. So doing some odd jobs, still in sport. Did you realize that like you couldn't see the next step? Is that where the fire department kind of became an option, or what did that transition look like?
The fire department was another option that presented itself to me. Being, I could mention some old names, but I don't think any of that, they don't. I think of the guys who, I'm such an old man now. I feel sad telling you that the people who worked out at Lindsay Park, who were firefighters, who I thought, hey, what's it like being a firefighter, who got me interested and was sort of the last straw to make me apply. They're all retired now, but it's like they seemed happy, fit,
active,
active, often would be skiing during the middle of the week, that kind of a thing. So I thought, that's something I'm interested in. But it presented itself. Again, it was I don't know, what if I stayed in Ontario? What would I be doing now? I have no idea. I have no idea.
Have you spent much time looking back on all these scenarios of when things present themselves to you? Like, are you reflective around all these moments of like things just showing up or coming into your world? And you're like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to go that way. In the moment, I'm guessing you don't see it that way. You're just like, oh yeah.
Yeah, in the moment, it's something different. I have a strong sense of, what you call it, destiny or serendipity or whatever it is, that I feel that way with my wife and kids. That because my wife was a co-op student at Lindsay Park, and then was employed by Lindsay Park after, and was just a friend for a long time. That's always my advice to young people romantically, which is my dating life was, there's someone that I find attractive. I'll go talk to her and see if she's a nice person. You know what I mean? And my wife, Jen, I knew her for 2 years and really, really liked her as a person before the romantic side even started. And now that we've been married for 22 years and together for 24, the romantic aspect ebbs and flows, but I still really, really like her. And I'm grateful for that. To be living in the same house with someone I really, really like. And then our kids, I have a very strong sense of destiny with our kids also, who are adopted from Ethiopia. And, from the first moment we met them, I just had this strong sense of, all of those steps, and me winding up in Calgary and then at Lindsay Park and marrying Jen. And we both had that same attitude about, we want to have a family. She, I have 3 sisters. She has a sister and 2 brothers. So we were both from large-ish families, I guess you would say. These days, that's large. And we both thought, we should have kids and we should probably adopt kids. Let's do both. And we sort of initiated both of those, trying to get pregnant, which didn't happen right away. And we were sort of going down that fertility clinic path and adopting. And the adopting thing happened first. And when you get a phone call to say it's a match, or you answer these 3 questions with the adoption agency as part of the process, you answer these 3 questions ahead. Now, I haven't talked about this in a long time. I hope I remember the questions. But it turns out it's only 2 questions. No, it's do you want a boy? It's 3 questions. Do you want a boy or a girl? And we said, we don't care. Surprise us, like nature, right? It's we don't care. What about age? And we said, well, as young as possible, for sure, as young as possible. But and then the third sneaky question that you aren't anticipating that turned out to be a sneaky question was, and a blessing at the same time, was, if your match has a sibling in the same adoption agency, would you consider taking 2? And your immediate thought is, of course, I couldn't dream of separating 2 kids who don't have parents anymore. And then I literally hung up the phone and said to Jen, I think we just agreed to adopt 2. and that's exactly what happened. Wow. That is exactly what happened. And immediately it was like, that's the way, you call it God, you call it destiny, call it whatever. It's like, that's the way our lives were intended to unfold.
What is that? Is that just like, it's like moving on intuition, or just moving with energy or direction? Like, there's something, do you just trust it? Like, how do you keep going down that path?
Do you want me to give you the meaning of life?
Well, and so for me, the way I'm wandering with this is like, some people are very robotic in how they make decisions, right? Black and white. Do this, get that. Do this to get here. And then there's this gray area in the middle. And it's seeing things, it's knowing who you are, and then opportunities present themselves. but it's like, it's a different way to do it. I don't know how to put words around it, but it's different.
Yeah, I don't.
You just trust it. You just like trust that that's more of your style and like your.
There's I think it's a Maya Angelou quote where it's like you have certain amount, and this is paraphrasing, obviously. You have a certain amount of information that you base your.
Yep.
When you know more, you do more. That's closer to the what it is, and if I was starting my life now, it would have been a completely different path. I have no idea. I have no idea what the answer is to that. I just tried to make the best decision at the time. But having said that, if my kid is 30 and working as a night watchman at a golf course because he's still trying to chase some kind of a dream that will net him nothing, even if he's the most successful he can be, I would have exactly the same reaction that my mom did. But of course, as soon as I, went to the Olympics and won a medal at the Olympics 4 years after that, then I was I was in the fire department also. Yeah. So I became what she bragged about, not complained about.
I'm very worried about you.
I guess so. Well, I have a completely different perspective on most of these things as a parent now. Yeah. And that's the biggest stress in my life is, what are, I'm being careful what I say here at the thought that my kids will hear me say this, but it's not to put too fine a point on it, but the only thing that makes me more tolerant of the knuckleheaded things that my kids do seemingly on a regular basis is the memory of the knuckleheaded things that I did when I was the same age.
It all makes sense.
And I've had this, my mother and father have passed now, but I had this conversation with my mom, parenting is so stressful. And she was like, well, it's all going to work out. It will all work out for better or for worse. Don't worry about it. And it's like, I probably put you through the ringer, or my sisters did. I did well in school. Yeah. I have two younger sisters, one who did great at school every minute of the way, and one where it was kind of a struggle, who's a nurse now. So it all does work out,
Somehow.
Yeah.
So when you find skeleton, what changes for you? How do you know that is the thing? You're on the fire department.
Yep.
So there's some sort of consistency around it in your world.
Yeah.
And then you find skeleton.
2000 was a big year for me because I took a driver's course. If you want to race a skeleton, you need to take a driver's course to learn how to drive a skeleton. And it's a bunch of coaches and you start halfway up and you move to the top. And then it's, because they don't just let you go from the top as a stranger off of, there is that aspect of it too. At some point you have to go. But anyway, sorry, I lost my train of
2000. You start, that's like your...
Yeah, so in 99, I took a driver's course. In 2000, at the end of that year, keeping in mind that I had done bobsled for so many years, so the training's the same, the track is the same, the concept is the same. I just learned how to steer a different kind of sled. So at the end of my first year, I think I won a bronze medal at the national championships, which sounds very quick, but I'm trying to say that all of the skills I had been working on for 7 or 8 years. I didn't walk in off the street. Yep. And then made the national team the following, in the it would be October of 2000. And that's when I got into the fire department also, and when I started dating Jen.
Wow.
So that was a big year.
Yeah. That's a lot of action in a condensed amount of time. Yeah. What's interesting is how you say all three of those things. How'd you balance all those? How do you train as an Olympic, with the goal of that, have a job where there's stress, it's shift work, and then a relationship? How do you How'd you manage all that?
Well, it is a job that you don't take home with you. Theoretically, you know, you want to talk about mental wellness. That's a whole other aspect of being a firefighter. But to a young guy, happy to be there, excited by it, you don't take it home. And when the shift is over, you don't have to give it a second thought until you go back for your next shift. So it was easy to compartmentalize. And then when if you're doing a power sport, it's not like marathon running. It's not like an endurance sport. You can only go an hour and a half training peak speed, peak power before you're risking tearing something off your muscular attachment of your hamstring or something, which happened a number of times. So there's only so much time that those things require. And as I say, you can compartmentalize it, and then you can go out with Jen and give your attention to that when you're doing that.
The path to the first games, was it everything you thought it was going to be? You've had this dream for all these years, and then you actually do the thing. Like, what is? That's
an interesting. I went to 2 Olympics, and one in which I failed to meet my expectations, and one in which I surpassed my expectations. I would say for my second one, I would be a strong contender for a medal and a gold medal. But the nature of it is it's like downhill skiing. It's just so easy to make a mistake that 5 people could have won that day, 10 people could have been. It's just sort of the nature of it. But my first Olympics, it was it was at the end of my second year of making the national team. So my third year of doing the sport, I had just, in the last World Cup leading into the Olympics, I had won my first ever career World Cup medal against exactly the same people I would be racing at the Olympics. And I thought, okay, I have a chance at a medal. And then after the first run, I was 5th, which is great. It was close. It wasn't really shooting distance to a medal because first, second, and third were a big gap. And then I mucked up on my second run and I dropped back to 10th. And that was, you talk about the post-Olympic depression. And I went through that big time. It wasn't, it was something I had, as you say, it was something I had been dreaming of since I watched the Montreal Olympics as a 9-year-old. And it was not, it was awesome in many ways, but this is something that I pass along as a coach. When I hear people saying, do I go for the experience? I remember someone saying, should I live in the Olympic Village just to take it all in? Or I know that distracts me. Should I live the answer is, make it all about the event. And when the event is over, the experience will take care of itself. If you've failed to live up to your expectations, that is a really tough pill to swallow. To go from 3rd and thinking I had a shot at 3rd in the very next competition to 10th, that was really difficult to swallow. I had someone ask me if I was a coach. I was 34. I was really old by Olympic standards, but I was 4 years away from my Olympic medal, my highlight. And someone, asked me if I was a coach. It just sort of, it was a downer. It was really a downer.
Does that,
when it shouldn't be, right?
Yeah. And what do you think that is? Do you think it's like a lifetime leading up to that moment? It's the sacrifices, the commitment, like there's all this, there's so much energy put towards this thing.
I think it just relates back directly to your expectations. Where should you have finished? If I should have finished 20th based on my World Cup standings, then 10th I would have been over the moon. But I was 6th in the World Cup standings, having just won a bronze. So 10th was a real letdown.
When you get home from that kind of experience, do you allow yourself to sit in that kind of like turmoil and then figure out, no, I'm going to go get the next one? And what did your process look like from getting home to knowing that you're going to put in 4 more years to go do it again?
Well, again, when I describe it to you, it sounds like there's a pattern to it. It sounds like all of these opportunities. It's like I win an Olympic medal at age 39, so it was not an overnight thing.
No.
It sounds like I'm only mentioning the moment that made me change paths, and I was in a bit of a funk there for a month, I would say.
Yeah.
But the day after, it's funny, I haven't told these stories in a long time. The day after my 10th place finish in Salt Lake, I overheard a coach of a guy named Jim Shea, who won the gold in Salt Lake in my event. And his coach said, we woke up that morning and there was a little bit of snow, and I looked at the temperature and I thought, we've nailed it. And he was talking about the runner preparation, and the same way a skier would use a different wax for a different snow. And I was more of a bobsled mindset, which is you have the race runner and you have the practice runner. And I really had just not even scratched the surface of the technical aspects to it. And I was using the same runners for every race I was in. And if the ice was really cold, this is what I can tell you now, looking at the whole career and knowing what I know about it now. When the ice was really cold, when the ice was very hard, when the steering required for that specific track was very hard steering. In other words, it was a very technical track. It wasn't just about aerodynamics and how fast you pushed. Then I did well. And so it just, and then that made me think, overhearing that coach made me think there's a whole aspect of this. Like I'm 2 years into this national team, and there's a whole aspect of, and I'm 6th overall in the world, and a whole area that I really haven't jumped into yet. That became my motivation. And that was the next year I got 5th at the World Championships. The next year I won the World Championships. So it was, the reality is that if you're 6th in the world, you're shooting distance from the top anyway. And I remember someone saying, why not you? And that was, from a sports psychology perspective, that was a significant mindset for me when I was able to say, well, there isn't a single competitor that I haven't beaten at least a couple of times. Maybe they had a bad day. Maybe I only beat so-and-so, who is the world overall World Cup champion. Maybe I only beat them when they had a bad day, but I have beaten them a couple of times. And so you knew it was possible. And that was one moment. And then another milestone was, well, I won a World Cup race. So there was a day when all of those competitors were here at the same time, and I came out on top. And now maybe someone didn't have the best day, but it's possible for me to beat every single one of them all together at the same time. And it's sort of, you go through steps that way of convincing yourself that it could actually happen.
Did you have a team around you? Like to help you kind of like, whether it's coaches or just like people in your ear or in your circle that would kind of just keep your head on?
Yes. Okay, here's a story I share when I'm talking to kids about discipline and having a passion for your sport. The team that I had, so most of the World Cups that I did, Canada was one of the top 3 nations, and therefore we were allowed to have 4 competitors on the men's side, and the women is a separate event, and we were allowed to have 4 women on the women's side. This is when I was an athlete on the team. And so I always had 3 teammates who had the same equipment. 3 out of the 4 of us were of the same size. So therefore we would set up the equipment the same way, different than you would if you were 150 pounds, for example. And we went through a process of, when I first joined the team, there was a guy named Jeff Payne who was a world silver medalist, had won World Cup races. And then I show up and I'm just brand new, and I was maybe a a long-term threat, because athletically I was as good or better than him,
Yep.
and technically he was better than me. So theoretically, as I learned more and more, I would be getting closer to him, and that's sort of what happened over the time. But initially, it was, he has this great body of knowledge for all the years that he's been doing it, and in his words, it's like, I'm not going to, it's an individual sport. I'm not going to help you to beat me. And so there was a process there. And eventually there was one year where I won the world championships, and he broke a bone in his foot at the beginning of the year, and he missed the first half of the season. And he said, could we meet? Can we go for a coffee at the end of that year? So that's 2 years before Torino. And he said, it's all on me. He took full responsibility for it. But he said, whatever joy the sport had for me is gone. I, missed the first half of the year, and apparently nobody gave a shit. And, it's if I was worried about you catching up, you were the world champion this year, so can we please work together? And so it was a process from there, and the next year it was better. And then the Olympic year, it was fantastic. And I am absolutely indebted to my teammates, because when you go to a new track and you're trying to learn how best, because there are tracks where if you're on the World Cup circuit, you've been to those tracks at least 3 times before, them cold, but the ice is a little thicker on the exit there. So it will require you doing 2 or 3 things different in the corner to not get pushed into the wall coming up. You know what I mean? Like it's such an analysis that you have to do. And if you have one coach, you probably have that coach in one location. A therapist maybe would have a camera to film in another location, or you have 3 of the best teammates in the world. We were the top team in the world for 3 or 4 years leading into, who are more talented than the coaches your nation has hired, who were in every single corner. And we decided at some point that we were going to work together, even though it was an individual sport. And we had our process, and it was extremely effective. And it was, that relates to this story. The nature of the World Cup circuit is that you spend approximately a week at each location. And you'd have maybe 4 races in a row, and then you'd have a Christmas break or what have you. And the one day off you have in the week is a travel day, and you drive to the next location. On this one occasion, we had been, I remember where we got to, I don't remember where we were coming from, but we were on the road all day. It was like 10 hours on the road, plus meal breaks and pee breaks and that sort of thing. And when we arrived, it was well after dark. It was late. We were all hungry. We had official training starting early the next morning. And my team, because the women race on a different day, we travel as the men's team. I'm sorry about that. We travel as the men's team and the women's team. So when the men's team arrived, after driving all day, it was like, what do you want to do? Food? See if, the hotel is even open still. Or do you want to go right to the track? Since we start in the morning, do you want to go right to the track and see how the track looks? And so I say I'm indebted to my teammates, because if one of us said, sorry, I'm just really hungry, I'm so tired, it wouldn't have happened. But collective, it was like, yes, let's go to the track. And we go to the front of the track. This is in a little town called Eagles, right outside of Innsbruck. We go to the front gates. It's locked up, but we notice the lights are on still in the track. So we park on a side road and walk through a farmer's field, maybe ankle deep in snow. We're in running shoes. We walk through a farmer's field to hop a fence to climb into a track that is already closed for the evening, but has not, the lights were probably on an automatic timer or something. And we start our process, and we have someone at the beginning of the corner, someone in the middle, someone at the exit. And it's, okay, this looks like there's more of a buildup here. I bet it's going to push you low in the middle of the corner. So tomorrow, Paul, why don't you try and go later in the corner and see if that takes care of the problem. I'll do more of what we did last time. And Jeff, you try and steer up at the beginning of the corner, see if that affects how that build up in the beginning. And we had a process, and we would just, it's assimilating an incredible amount of information in a very short period of time. And you have three practice days, so 6 practice runs typically, which is 6 minutes of practicing it before you're going to race. So what we did better than anyone was information data analysis as a team, as a system. And it was because my teammates were the same size as me, the same equipment as me, we steered the same. The pressures affected us the same. And then in that moment in that track, the lights at some point shut off. So by moonlight, we hop out of the track and hop over a fence and walk through a farmer's field to get back in our van to go to a hotel where the restaurant and everything is already closed for the evening, to be hungry until we have a meal the next morning when official training begins. And my question, if I share that story, is how many people do you think we ran into on the track doing the same thing? And the answer, of course, is 0. And that was how we did it. And, that's why there's someone on social media, and I should know his name, and I apologize, who says following your bliss, following your passion is the worst thing you can do. You have to follow what you were good at. Do you know the clip? No. And I say our success as a team was years in the making for sure, but it was because we all thought about it all the time. And when I coached, when I stepped back from being a part of that team and I became the coach, would it be too strong to say the bane of my existence? The hardest thing for me to do as a coach was to convince someone else to think about it all the time. How do you do that?
I was just going to ask you, can you get a read off of somebody? Do you just listen to what they're interested in and what they're focused on and what they're trying to learn? And then you kind of have an idea that they are doing that or they're not doing that. And then do you know if they're not doing it, this is, the chances of this working is probably decreased.
Yeah, but you have a conversation. Anytime, if I'm trying to teach you about a corner, I can engage you in a conversation with it, which will solidify the concepts in your mind and how you're going to try it differently or the same next time. But what we did was, there was a year where my sister for Christmas bought me, obscure reference warning, season 2 of Scrubs on DVD. And have you even heard of that show?
I've heard of it. I've never seen it though.
Okay, I had never heard of it.
Okay.
It's this stupid slapstick comedy about doctors in a hospital. And it was so stupid and hilarious. I'd never heard of the show, let alone season 1. My sister sends me DVDs, also outdated, of season 2 of Scrubs. And I can tell you now that season 2 was the best. And it was the best thing that our team could have done, because we all sort of got into it. And it was 22 minutes of not thinking about what we were obsessing over every other waking moment of our lives.
Amazing.
Which is exhausting and drives you crazy eventually. But it separated us from everyone else. No question about it. And that's exactly in line with Wayne Gretzky as a kid watching hockey and looking at what the left wing does only when he doesn't have the puck. That's an obsession. That's borderline. You have a problem. It's just not drugs or alcohol or something that's slowly killing you.
It's a sport. Do you think that obsession is the thing that equates to results? Do you need that?
In what?
In sport.
That's my answer. Depends on the sport. Because if you are a 100-meter sprinter, for example, the training, the diet, the genetics, genetic makeup, all of those are critically important. Do you need to spend 3 or 4 additional hours today thinking about it?
Right.
I bet there's an advantage. There's an advantage in terms of self-awareness and joint angles that you need an internal self-awareness, even for something as simple as how quickly can you cover 100 meters running.
Yeah.
But it's another ballpark to analyze something that's a mile long. And you're looking at differences that the ice wall, as you go into that corner, last year it was that thick and this year it's this thick. And how does that, you know what I mean? It's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
And then, skeleton, like bobsleigh, like downhill skiing, like so many other race sports, is really, there's no strategy. So in some races, for sure, there's strategy. There's pacing. There's, are you a sprint at the end kind of a person? There's no strategy like that in skeleton. It's in the first 10 meters, how can you cover that distance the fastest you possibly can, et cetera, all the way down. But something like basketball or hockey, where there's the strategic aspect to it as well, there's no limit. Like Tom Brady, I think is a great example of someone. Tom Brady or Wayne Gretzky or Sidney Crosby are the ones that I use as people who are considered, with Sidney Crosby, at least at one moment in time, he was considered the best player on the planet. Gretzky, for most of his career, was considered the best player on the planet. And was he the fastest? Definitely not. Did he have the hardest shot? No. Was he the strongest? There's a whole list of things. Tom Brady, is he the fastest guy? Absolutely not. There's a whole list of characteristics that they are average at. So why would you call Tom Brady the GOAT? Because he thinks about it all the time. There's this great NFL Films video of Bill Belichick and Ray Lewis and 3 or 4 iconic NFLers talking about. And Ray Lewis was talking about a teammate on the Ravens that he had. And this teammate was like, I'm going to blow that guy up. Because look at him all lanky and slow. I'm going to destroy that guy. And Ray Lewis said, you look at him as an athlete, he looks at you like you're a pawn on a chessboard and you're playing 2 different games. And that's why we call Tom Brady, who's I have a friend who shows his combine film.
I've seen that highlight. I've seen the running like his 40.
It's like, hey, maybe I could be an NFL quarterback if you watch that. But it's at some, like, there's the chess aspect to it also.
That was interesting. Because I never know, like, do the athletes that accomplish something great have to be redlined all the time? And then when you answer it like that, it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, the answer is, I'll tell you what I'm intimately familiar with. In skeleton, and I won't be specific about this because I don't want to insult anybody, but I look at someone who's athletically really good, like in the top, let's say 3 in the push at the beginning. And then you look, there's usually at every track, they have a speed trap somewhere on the track. And if the velocity is competitive, sometimes it's not. Your equipment maybe is not perfect for the conditions or perfect for your size or steering method. But if you're competitive at the start, you're competitive in the speed, all that leaves is how well you drive. And if that's the problem, what you need to do is obsess over that track. And I don't know that that's a healthy thing to do, but it's a successful thing to do, to think about that all the time. And the amount of time, before the Torino Olympics, every 4 meters, I took my wife's camera, which is a very nice camera, and took a photograph all the way down that track.
You'd walk down and just snap it every, okay.
And there is a POV video of camera on someone's back going down the track. And I've watched that to the point where, if I see it again, it'll drive me crazy. But it's very common. This is my experience. It's very common for someone to think, I got 6th today. Or my start was competitive, my speed was competitive, but I wasn't on the podium. What are you going to do? I'm going to work harder in the gym. I'm going to go back to what I'm comfortable with. I'm going to go back to trying to get another 100th at the start when there are 3 points where you lost half a second driving down. So what you really should do, which isn't intuitive maybe, is close your eyes and imagine yourself in the track for an hour. 1 minute run, do it again for an hour. That's an incredibly difficult mental exercise, but that's what it requires.
Just so fascinating. My mind just like zipping, leading up.
Who would have thought that skeleton would be?
But it's
interesting to someone who
yeah
have maybe watched it once. But I always say it would be exactly like downhill skiing.
Yeah.
There's a course. Canada always does well when we race at Lake Louise.
Yeah.
Better than their overall standings because you know that your home course cold.
Yeah.
And so easy to make a mistake that, like for skiing, I always say, there was someone years ago said, was criticizing a downhill skier for saying, the downhill skier was Eric Gay, and he had said, I don't want to hear about medal predictions. Like it's just adds to the pressure. It's not my business.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it. And someone was all over, I forget the guy's name, it was all over him saying, if you can't take the pressure, get out. And my response to that is, his job is to go down that track, and if his edges do this for a little bit, he can come back 4 years if he's still competitive. That's what he's facing. So if he doesn't want to talk about your guess as to what the total medal count will be, that's his business. And leave him alone, Mr. Hockey guy. No offense to hockey. But it's like, show me a 2-minute segment of hockey where there aren't 3 mistakes.
For sure.
Where you don't blow a pass, where you don't fail to clear the blue line when you have it in your own zone. It's constant mistakes. It's how you react to it. It's a completely different thing.
Yeah. That like mental fitness leading up to Torino, going down the track and taking all the pictures and, hours visualizing this thing. Was that the reason you win? And is that sustainable? Would that have been sustainable for another 4-year run? That kind of like energy, because it feels like all encompassing, exhausting, focused.
I'm tired telling you about it.
Yeah.
It's
the reason you won?
I would say, yeah. Well, my teammates.
Yeah, all of it.
The process, the fact that I was surrounded by 3 other people who were equally disturbed.
Good timing.
Focused on that to the point where 22 minutes of scrubs was a joyous occasion. It's actually a very funny, so stupid, but a very funny. It was perfect. It was
perfect. It's
perfect.
connected to this. This random show is connected to this result.
Yeah.
It's so obscure.
Yeah, and that it was season 2 of a show I had never
totally
heard of before. Yeah.
I
don't know that it is sustainable. And, it was perfect timing for me as a 39-year-old, an old man by athlete standards. And I was just looking for the perfect exit strategy. And there it was. But it wasn't, that's not what we did every week.
Yeah.
I had the video. I'd be on the World Cup circuit looking at the Torino video.
You're just like locked in on that when you get there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I know firsthand that Calgary track, for example, my home track, a track that if you include bobsled runs, I've probably gone down that 2,000 times. So otherwise, it is a track that I shouldn't be competitive on. And my last 3 years, if we had a race in Calgary, I would be in the medals.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't be. In Calgary, it should be the fastest starter because it's not a technically demanding track. It doesn't require super hard steering anywhere. So someone with better aerodynamics with, the best start should beat me. And that didn't happen. Why? Because when you've done something 2,000 times, I can be a human shock absorber, which translates into speed. So I'm completely relaxed. Yeah. And when I come into a corner, I go right there. I time it perfectly and I give the steering, which is a brake, right? It's applying force on the runner to steer. for exactly the amount and the pressure I need to do. Whereas someone else, or if I'm on someone else's track,
Yep.
I'm looking, it's like, oh, I'm a little early, so I'll have to compensate in this way. And now I've been looking and not being human jello to absorb the energy for 30 meters.
Yep.
And that's a 100th difference.
All that time, energy, work for that kind of like difference. Like it's just,
Yeah.
when you won your gold, what did that feel like? Was that like the pinnacle of everything? Were you surprised? Were you like, I'm done? Like,
I was done.
What was your like? What did that moment feel like?
A relief,
Yeah.
honestly. I mean, it was wonderful. It was. There's a moment when, in Torino, there were 3 Olympic villages. There was one in sort of the cross country ski area.
Yeah.
I'm confusing Olympics, but we weren't in Torino. So there were 3 villages.
Right.
We were in Sestriere, the mountain village. So our medal ceremony in Torino was the next night because our skeleton happened in the evening, and then you do the drug testing. And so the award ceremony there was sort of a flower ceremony at the event, and then you'd have the medals in Torino in the big central piazza in downtown Torino the next day. And so we had we snuck people into the village. My wife, has no accreditation. And it was like, that kind of thing will happen less and less, but it's like you have a decent person who understands this is my wife and this is my coach. And, and we just, stayed up late and had drinks and just took in the moment. And it was beautiful. And the next afternoon, it was 3 limousines, one for each medalist. Well, it was awesome. It was awesome. It was like your 15 minutes of, and I was in the same car as my teammate, Jeff, who won the silver medal. And it was like, I will never be in this spot again. Yeah. So enjoy it. Well, he stayed around for another 4 years, but I knew I was done. I had and that was literally the last time I've ever been on a sled. And so it was like, enjoy it because this is your one and only chance to take this in. And it was limousine. And when we got close to Torino, suddenly motorcycle cops were beside us. And then they would, phone call from the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, and the motorcycle cops, when we were in Torino, would drive ahead and block traffic so we could go right through red lights. And it's like, I said, let's get this line correct. I said, Jeff, it's like we're rock stars. And he said, I'm pretty sure, not Keith Richards, Mick Jagger. I'm pretty sure Mick Jagger has to stop for red lights. And it was like, you're right.
We're here.
You're right.
When you, could you actually enjoy every moment? Like, did you really like squeeze the hell out of that moment? Like just everything you did?
The after moment?
Yeah. Like, did you really get to like let it all wash over you?
Yeah, I'd say. Yeah. I didn't, I was 39. I wasn't, the go to Cowboys every single weekend kind of guy anymore. I was a married man. I was, it was such a relief, honestly, because I have known many athletes who the psychology, as I mentioned before, the oversimplification of the psychology is just never give up. And at some point we all have to give up. And I was, as I say, very old for, it wasn't realistic for me to stick around any longer, let alone 4 years to go to the Vancouver Olympics. So I was just thrilled that I was able, it was my dream to go out on top. The best retirement in sports history for me is John Elway, to win the Super Bowl, come back one more year, win the Super Bowl and say, that's it. I'm not throwing another pass. And in a non-professional sport, I did as close as I could. And I am grateful for that.
It's rare
to go out on top.
It's a rare thing.
As an old man, too.
Yeah, put that on top of everything.
Yeah. Oh, if I was younger, even.
When you retired from sport, did you know that it was always going to be this piece of your life after? You know, whether it's the coaching stuff, like did you know right away that was going to be part of your post-career?
I think so. It's always been, you know, whether it's the Blue Jays or whoever it is, like I'm still very passionate about it.
Yeah.
I would say the Olympics is higher than professional sport for me.
Yeah.
I knew my kids would probably be involved in sport, although quite honestly, I've never thought I would be, but I became the guy reduced to, you know, son, I do know a little bit about what I'm talking about. Do you want to? Could I offer you a tip? You know, no? Okay.
Dad knows nothing.
Okay, you're right. It's probably completely changed.
I'm old.
Yeah.
Did it, but like the coaching piece, was it a natural?
It was interesting because Dark Horse, I would say, is a program designed in response to what drives kids out of sport. And that arrived from watching our youngest play hockey. I didn't know when I was done coaching, I knew I wanted to get into something else. I didn't know what it was.
Yep.
And so our youngest son was playing U8. So he was 8 or 7 and Division II community hockey. So no, it's not, to answer your next question. It wasn't the NHL. And I say Division II so people appreciate there's another level of crazy beyond this, but 7-year-old kid standing, not my son, his teammate on the ice, and the coach is yelling at him to do something, and he's not sure what he's supposed to do, and he just freezes, and the coach grabs him and yanks him onto the bench. And Jen had a real, like, she was fiery angry over that one. But on the drive home from that game, and we were not talking about this, and from the back seat, Tay, our youngest, says, "Man, Coach takes this way too seriously." And it's comical, it's funny, and it's not funny.
Yeah.
If it wasn't so true, it would only be funny. But it's what is it? That was a very pivotal moment for me, thinking, what is it about that environment where the adult is oblivious to something that's painfully obvious to a 7-year-old?
Yeah.
So
you started
so that, you know, our Dark Horse is basically, we say it's about fun, physical literacy, and a growth mindset, but it's about fun more than anything.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't, and that's sort of my message for youth sport coaches. If you're yelling at them or benching them because this is Division I or this is AAA, you're failing to take into account what motivates the kids who ultimately become great.
Yeah.
Which is thinking about it all the time, which is fun. In very simple terms, it's just fun.
I coach with Keith. I coached his 2 kids.
I haven't called you Keith at all.
No, we're good. Yeah, we're like
or
locked.
Russ.
Yeah, we're locked. So I coached Keith. He's got 2 kids. It's like U9, U11 is kind of when I was coaching with him. It was like Div 4 to start, and then they got really good, and then Div 1. And so I hadn't coached in a long time, but to be back in the hockey world and coaching these kids, what I found fascinating was, yes, make it fun, but put some discipline and structure beside it so that they do see the results, and then that gets really fun.
Exactly. Now you said that perfectly. As far as I don't have to add anything to that at all. But what you said is what's missed. That doesn't, you know, we have respect in sport, which is an important thing. And I worry that some people misinterpret that as I have to have a smile on my face all the time, as if you don't have to hold kids accountable. But progressing and getting a little better, that's part of the fun, you know? And this, you know, we want to tell parents sometimes, your kid's not going to the NHL. Yeah. But I would never tell that to a kid because that's part of the fun. And when we were kids, we all, you know, dreamt about that. Yeah. And every time we played road hockey, it was, and I grew up in Toronto, we were either the Leafs or the Oilers. Or when when I was younger, it was the Islanders who were winning the Stanley Cups.
Bossy and Trottier. And,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then as we were older, that's when Gretzky joined the Oilers. And so we were always arguing as to who was Darryl Sittler and who was Wayne Gretzky and that sort of thing. And I would never take that away from a kid, because that's part of the fun. Just like working hard at something. You know, like sport is about teaching values. The greatest lesson you could possibly learn, in my view, from sport is that if you work hard at something, you get better. And that's rewarding in its own right. That's such a basic thing and such an important thing.
Do you think it'll, like these messages around sport right now, is it an uphill battle to kind of change the narrative of what's happening? As in, and for me from the outside, I look as, when I came up through sport, it was pretty, to go to tryouts. The only thing you did was go to conditioning camp a week before tryouts so you could get the rust off your skates and then go do your thing.
Yeah, because all summer you were riding your bike or
swimming,
playing baseball or swimming
soccer,
or whatever. Yes.
And now it's a big business.
Yeah.
Private hockey, private camps, private everything for every sport, 12 months a year. This narrative, it's a different approach, right? It's a different way to think about it.
Yeah. It's hard for me to say definitively that for someone who really has talent and potential to go the highest level, that wouldn't be your best chance. I can't definitively say that's not the case, but I know that if you look at current NHL players, you look at the level they played before, and maybe it's changing. You know, people say, "Oh, Gretzky wouldn't he wouldn't score 900 goals in this," but he, Sidney Crosby's probably a better example. He's still a great player in the NHL at an old man status. And he overlapped with Gretzky. Did he run roughshod over them back then? No. It's still a game. It's still a huge part of the game is between your ears. So I hate the idea that we're doing 12-month a year hockey or soccer or whatever it is, because the one kid that makes it through that system, how many kids have we sacrificed having that system? It's not, you know the name Bracco?
Carrie Bracco?
Carrie Bracco. Yeah. So his daughter played on our eldest son's team, so we know the Braccos. And I saw Carrie not long ago, and he said this to me. When the Royals won the national junior A championships in '93 or whatever it was, don't quote me on the dates.
You're right there.
Is it?
Yeah.
It was $600 to be on that team. When they won a medal in 20 whatever, it was $800 plus a cash call, so it might have been around $1,000, but still around $1,000 to be on that team in 2002 or 3 or whatever it was. And now that's off the charts. And the same number, and his point was the same number of kids make the NHL. Yeah. So it's just, we've raised it to the best kids whose parents can afford for them to play. That's hockey. I'm sure it's the same in a lot of other sports. For sure. Hockey would be, I assume, one of the more expensive ones because of ice time, because of equipment, but it's still dirt cheap compared to skiing, let alone something I have no experience with, like polo or something. I don't know. I'm sure there are more expensive ones, but so what do we sacrifice? Like if you play, early specialization, doing one thing all year round at age 8 versus 15 or 16 when you're starting to get serious about it. We know that's associated with rate and severity of injury. It's also associated with when you quit or get cut from the last team you wanted to make and didn't make. It's associated with the sedentary lifestyle because it was a job for you from about age 9 or 10. If you started doing that all year round at 8, maybe you loved it for a couple of years. Maybe you couldn't, you dreamt about it all the time. Maybe it was perfect, but at some point it became something that you had to do until you were released from it and you had to give up your dream at that point. So what's the value there of doing that for 100 kids for one to make it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's why I think the school is the great untapped resource, because you get everybody, and sport should be thought of as a health thing, not a sport thing. It should be a division. It should be preventive health care.
Yeah. Which then that sets you up for life. That doesn't matter how high you go or where you go.
Yeah.
But you live a better life all the way through.
Yeah. Mentally and physically. And I feel like I've said this a lot recently. We're in the midst of a mental health crisis amongst the youngest generation. They say that I'm what am I, an X? I don't know what I am. I think it's X. I'm not a baby boomer. I'm too young to be a baby boomer. By 1 year. Yes, I'm clear. Baby boomers. Old timers. So it's like the diagnosed anxiety, diagnosed depression, suicide rate, non-suicidal self-harm. All of those, you graph all of those things, it's shaped like a hockey stick based on when cell phones and social media hit. And so what are we doing about, like, sport is one of the great, get outside. What do we know about happiness? Get outside, get the blood flowing, be social. Sport checks a lot of those boxes. Or it can be something really depressing because it's too serious and it's something you would do for fun and mental health, and some parent who thinks their kid is going to the show takes the fun out of it,
Living their dream.
Yeah.
their parents' dream.
It is kind of. And my experience is that if you played at a high level, you don't make that mistake.
I joke about it a little bit, kind of like I could be a financial advisor to hockey parents. If I told
play
you
community hockey.
If I told you I can guarantee that I can save you $250,000 in the next 10 years.
Oh, that
by like
it makes me angry to think of that.
But it'd be like, because you're going to lose it all. I can guarantee 0.001% that one might, but the rest of you, it's diminishing returns. I was like, you imagine.
I don't want to think of it in those terms, but
I'll take 17% of your 250 and you're still ahead.
And you're still thrilled.
You're totally happy. Yeah. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure.
Really cool to, me being a sport guy, born and raised in Calgary, hear your name,
Well, I waltzed in here not realizing what Humphreys family was and all the connections we have. And I knew just Jeff Shepard.
Yeah. And that's why this show is really cool for me, because I get to create these interesting connections, right? And and that's what makes our city so cool.
Yeah.
Which is why I end the show with, when I say Calgary, where's your head go?
Well, I knew you were going to ask that because I've watched the show, so I know you.
And I'm polite, and I tell the guests, I'm like, hey, here's how it's going to end, just so I'm not being the asshole and like trying to crush somebody.
Have you ever stumped anyone with that
totally.
question? Really? Yeah.
For sure. Because someone would be like, oh, that's a good question. I'm like, I emailed you.
Well, my answer would be that it's a lot of things. And I know you've said it's everything. It's a lot of things because it's family. It's the good part of sport, the challenging part of sport that I want to fix. And it's sort of everything for me also. But overwhelmingly, I would say it's a city full of like-minded people who see the value in sport and are trying to make it, like David Legg at MRU. Have you had him on?
No.
Okay, well.
Yeah. Note.
Yeah. He is part of a committee trying to make Calgary the most active and outdoor and healthy, and part of that would be a tourist, outdoorsy tourist destination as well. But that's sort of the reality of Calgary is access to so many facilities, so many green areas within the city, just next door to so many beautiful mountain and river, and the fact that you can be on a river. I'm a big paddleboarder. And you can be on a river inside the city limits and have no sign of civilization for 360 degrees as you look around. But I think it's more like Calgary is truly a hub, an Olympic hub, and not just Winter Olympic hub. And I think it's a beautiful thing to, I remember when I was a kid and this fitness facility that I worked at, there was one guy there who was an Olympian in bobsled. And I have no idea what his name was. I had no idea if he even went to the Olympics. He was national team. Did they win a medal? I have no recollection. I just remember thinking, wow, that guy's a national team or an Olympic bobsledder. And you come to Calgary and we're knee deep in Olympians around here. There's so much potential to encourage and I've been part of a project I've been working on. I've been interviewing successful Olympians, and that's sort of the data that I'm taking to try and pass on to community coaches in another project I'm working on right now. Because the basis of success isn't you yelling at your 10-year-old and making them go outside and doing a 1,000 shots. It has to come from the kid. The best thing you can do is not undercut their love of the game.
Yeah.
And then everything works, to your point a minute ago about it sets you up for life. If you love it, if you can't wait to put your skates on or kick the ball around or whatever, slow pitch team, if you can't wait to do that again because you love the people and the social aspect of it and it burns a few calories, then that's the purpose of it.
Yeah.
It's not how good, There will always be one or two, and what do they say in the NHL in youth hockey? It's 1 per 2,000 make the NHL. So why we change it all for everyone? It's what is David Epstein's book Range? Are you familiar with that one? He talked about mostly the idea was that generalists. You need to be a generalist, and all the great solvers of the world's problems are typically generalists because they pull it from one thing and apply it somewhere else. And in that book, he's got this great quote about early specialization is only a concept in music and in sport, typically perpetuated by someone who profits from the concept of that early specialization is valuable and works. And I feel like I'm surrounded by it is what it is. There's the for-profit groups that make you afraid that your kid will be left behind if you don't do that. But there's also this huge community in Calgary. This is a very long,
it's great,
winded answer about what I think about Calgary.
Well, it's like it's starting to come.
You invite me back and ask me this 2 or 3 times, and I'll get it down to a few sentences. But there's a lot of people in this town who appreciate that sport is a beautiful thing for a kid, whether they make it to any level or not.
Yep.
And you're a beneficiary of that, and I'm a beneficiary of that. It's one side of one perspective that I bring to the table is I won an Olympic, that sounds self-serving, I apologize for that, but I won an Olympic gold medal, and I know firsthand that didn't have any effect on my life and what was important in my life. Or as a firefighter, I still have a sense of how close that mental unwellness could be. And sport and being outside and paddleboarding or riding a bike, all of those things are still activities that I love to do because I was raised on it's just sport.
Yep.
And it's fun. And who cares who wins?
It's a simple concept. It's just hard to tether yourself to that idea.
I guess.
It's thanks for doing this.
My pleasure.
Really cool to just hear the story, because I don't do any research on in my guests. So I know how they fit, artist, entrepreneur, athlete. So I know that you're an athlete. I kind of, I know that you won a gold, and that's it. That's all I know. So it's cool for me because people see the highlight of your life, this achievement, this gold medal. But I'm way more fascinated by actually what led to it and just hearing the story. So this is it's
an odd path, really.
Yep. Thank you. I'm sure we'll stay connected.
Awesome.